This is not a typical panel. This is an essay reading followed by a discussion. It won't work without your input, so I encourage you to take notes while listening and post questions in the panel questions channel. Since I'll be reading, I won't see your commentary in the regular chat. The discussion will mainly take place by you all raising your hands, hooves, tentacles, or other limbs, and joining me on stage. But if you're unable to join the stage, you're also very welcome to write in the panel questions channel, then I'll read it aloud for you. Another note, this essay is PG-13 due to brief, non-descriptive mentions of kink, miscarriage, animal death, and animal neglect. But we're all over the age of 13 or we wouldn't be allowed to be here, so it should be good. But still, listen at your own discretion. One day, I looked at myself in the mirror and realized that I'd become a horse. Where I usually expected to see a bison, I now hoped to see a horse, which was very unexpected. I should probably clarify here that the change didn't happen overnight, only the realization. I'd been pretending to be a pony for a while now. I just never thought it'd end up feeling like anything other than pretense. That it would end up feeling natural. That it could feel natural. Now, why would anyone pretend to be a horse? There are lots of reasons when you really think about it. I mean, kids do it all the time. And I think my reasons were the same now at age 27 as they were at age 7. It was fun. At this point, I had firmly decided that I was done having awakenings of the selfhood. That is, awakenings related to my self-perception, such as kin types, as opposed to awakenings related to my relationships, such as heart types. I had my bison theriform, my knoll kin type, and my Ben 10 fictotype, and I felt like there was more than enough facets for one person. But you all know how this goes. The moment you say you're done, a new awakening happens. It's almost like a universal law. To assert that you have concluded anything about your identity is to dangle a carrot in front of fate. I sometimes wonder if I should have just kept my mouth shut and not tempted the powers that be, because figuring out a new facet of yourself is always bothersome. But then again, I think the awakening that came out of this might ultimately be for the better. I think horse was always hibernating somewhere at the back of my mind, waiting for the right conditions to awaken. But not in the way that bison was. I was a bison in my most recent past life, and I believe I have been a bison from the moment my present life was conceived. There is a bison within me, the same way there's phytoplankton in crude oil. I was born with bisonhood, I just didn't recognize it until I was 18, when a series of shifts forced me to acknowledge it. My horsehood was not there from birth. Its construction began when I first sat on a horse at the age of 2. The construction is still ongoing, and to be honest, I don't think I can stop it. My horsehood is like a psychological Winchester house, but instead of upsetting the spirits of the deceased, ceasing construction will upset spirit stallion of the Cimarron. Not literally, of course. I don't feel like I'm being haunted by a fictional horse, but now, in a way I do kind of feel exactly like that. My horsehood cannot be separated from fictional depictions of horses. Though I've had contact with theriform horses since I could walk, that contact wasn't continuous or daily. I spent every weekend at the local pony riding school from age 5 to 14. But my weekdays were spent reading horse comics, watching horse movies, collecting horse trading cards, and playing with my toy horses. Not even direct contact with theriform horses could fully protect me from the influence of the artificial horse. I think my problem was that, in many ways, the simplicity of plastic horses made them more alluring than flesh and blood horses. A horse is an animal with its own needs and desires. It was born to eat grass, play with other horses, and survive long enough to procreate. It was not born to entertain children of another species. Theriform horses are individuals, and they can actually be somewhat boring. Whereas my DVDs of My Little Ponytails were objects tailor-made for the children of humans, whether the children themselves were human or not. That's not to say that my time at the riding school bored me. Of course it didn't, otherwise I wouldn't have come there every week for almost a decade. But I didn't come there for the horses, not really. I came there for the idea of the horse. I came there for the largely one-sided bond I had with my favorite lesson horse, who spent the rest of the week carrying around a dozen other children, as he had been doing for 15 years at that point. I came there to touch the mystical creature I'd been reading about in my fantasy books. The creature who was supernaturally loyal to its rider and could understand every spoken word. The creature who had more in common with a dragon of Pern than with the animal I rode around on. Not that I realized any of that back then. I was 8 years old and I loved horses. My quote-unquote inability to note the contextual divide between the animals that shared our world and the ones that were invented to please me, as Elena Passarella puts it in her book Animals Strike Curious Poses, made sure I saw no difference between Gnu, the weary old Welsh mountain gelding who carried me on trail rides and ate mints out of my palm, and the magical horses who roamed the world of Bella Sera and fought against evil witches. My mom could only afford 2 after-school activities. By age 14, I was committed to my art classes, but less so to the horses. And in any case, I was growing too old for a beginner's pony riding school. So when I acquired an interest in photography, there wasn't really a question of which activity to drop. At the same time, horse media was starting to feel juvenile. I was cynical the way teenagers usually are, and was more interested in books about vampire wars than horse adventures. Though my interest never truly went away, it waned and grew even more disconnected from the real thing, to the point that my sketchbooks were full of unicorns and centaurs, rather than attempts at depicting actual horses. After I stopped attending riding lessons, it would be another decade before I allowed my interest in horses to resurface. A decade in which I awakened as a bison, as well as a few other things. But the bison is what's relevant for comparison here, so it's what I'll focus on. I considered myself a therian since I was 14, but I didn't know my theriotype until I was 18, when my latent bisonhood finally forced itself to the forefront. One second I was trying to follow along with math class, and the next it was like I'd been transported into the body of a bison. I pictured myself wading through soft green grass, feeling my heavy hooves and broad back working, smelling the summer air. And just like that, I was back in my classroom. Crazy what the mind can do, right? I imagine it's the closest I've been to astral traveling. The vision was so overwhelming, I had to excuse myself, go into the hallway, and just breathe for a minute. I instantly understood what the vision meant. Imagine going your whole life feeling like something's missing, but never knowing words like yearning, longing, need, or hunger. How would you even describe to other people how intensely you were missing something? That's how I felt when I awakened as a bison. It felt like I'd been made whole. There were parallels between the ways I reacted to my newfound bison identity and the way I'd reacted when my horse girl identity first blossomed. To show their acceptance, my friends gave me a pendant in the shape of a bison skull, which I proudly wore and wear every day. Where horses and unicorns once had been, bison now overtook the margins of my notebooks. I bought plushies, figurines, artwork, and more. More. Books and fridge magnets and stamps. If I found a bison in the wild, I added it to my herd. But that was where the difference between my horse girl identity and my bison identity was. I had never been forming a herd when I surrounded myself with horses. There was no self-recognition. Horse girl had been a core part of how I viewed myself, but horse was something my mind focused on, not something my soul ached for. Surrounding myself with other bison like me, even in plastic form, is a way for me to feel more at home with my surroundings. I've written at length about herd formation before, and I don't think I can word it much better than I did back then. Bison used to migrate in herds of millions, split into bands of a few thousands, which yet again split into clans of just a few dozen. Each clan was led by an old and wise leader who had survived the migration before and remembered the route, or at least the general direction. A band of clans, or even a single clan, may roam alone for much of the year, but the bison's never-ending wandering would always eventually unite it with the others in a gathering of millions. Not a pilgrimage towards a destination, but a gathering at a meeting point that was gradually defined over millions of migrations, until all the bands and clans had overlapping travel routes. I could never describe horse herds with the same intimacy, because I don't see theriform horses as herd members. When I've had the chance to interact with a horse or bison, it has always been with a barrier separating us. A plain old species barrier, yes, as no horse or bison will ever see me as their conspecific. Nor should they. You do not want a giant ungulate to be territorial towards you in your comparatively tiny and fragile human-looking body. And a literal barrier in the case of the bison, whom I'd only seen from behind a fence. But more than that, I've come to recognize that there is a barrier in my own mind. I can never escape the fact that I was raised by humans. I share their values and prejudices. Even when I'm consciously aware of my biases, the humans around me subconsciously reinforce them. Don't think you're free from human notions just because you're something other than human. The first horse I remember loving was a Schleich pony that I got for Christmas, when I can't have been more than 2 years old. If I'd been born just 4 generations earlier, or in any of the hundreds of generations before that, I never would have seen a plastic horse, and I very well might have loved a flesh and blood horse before ever owning a toy one. Many of us have been outright robbed of this relationship with real animals. Even if you're one of the lucky few like me who grew up with cats and started riding horses at 5, and who got their own rabbit at 8, it's unlikely that you've interacted with animals unencumbered. How many of you have seen up close how a cat will tear apart a songbird? How many of you have seen a stallion in rut? How many of you have seen a rabbit eat her aborted fetus? These modes are as much a part of the animal as its cuteness or majesty. Even I didn't get to see my rabbit eat her fetus, as my mom deemed it too graphic and shielded me from it, even though I'd been participating in the slaughter of meat rabbits for 3 years at that point. But the rabbit herself was not shielded from it. The documentaries don't show how cats injure songbirds or play with them before killing them. The documentaries don't show horses breeding, because people can't remove themselves from those situations. People can't quietly observe, and this all too often includes non-humans with personhood. An outrage, they shout at the documentary crew who didn't save the songbird. Perverted, they yell at the crew trying to show animals in their unperverted nature, even when seeing perversion in animals is far more worrying than not seeing it. I owed it to my pet rabbit to see her as she was, an animal acting like an animal, experiencing a miscarriage and being more concerned with nutrient loss and predator attraction than with honoring the dead or comforting the child of humans. My mom didn't tell me until I was 25, and until then I think I was somehow under the impression that rabbit cannibalism only happened in books and academic texts. If I'd been born in the 1400s and we only kept rabbits for meat, would my mom still have shielded me? I don't know, but nonetheless, I feel robbed of the chance to know my rabbit as she truly was. I think anthropomorphism keeps most of us from truly knowing animals. And yes, you are most likely guilty of anthropomorphism too, animal born of human that you are. If you've ever thought of wolves as noble, or tapeworms as gross, or worms as simple, or parrots as particularly clever, you've engaged in anthropomorphism. The wolf is no more or less noble than the tapeworm living in its gut. Nobility is a human concept. The worm takes actions that no parrot could ever perform, no matter how clever. For a more specific example of the insidious nature of anthropomorphism, a dog does not need talking buttons to communicate with another species, yet people will praise button-using dogs for their apparent intelligence. A dog pressing a button that robotically speaks the word door is no more clever than my Labrador who paws at the door when she wants out. If anything, it speaks to the lack of emotional intelligence of the person who has a better understanding of their companion animal when it uses a translation button. I've seen people using buttons for every animal, from cats to goats to guinea pigs. But I've only kept guinea pigs for 4 years, and I've never once needed a translator to understand them. They have different weeks for when they want food, when they want company, and when they're just chatting. If they've been in my lap too long and want to go back, they chatter their teeth and lift their heads a certain way. And they certainly don't need talking buttons to express the emotions of happy or mad, which has to be the dumbest thing those buttons have ever done. Never mind the discussion of whether animal joy is equivalent to human joy, or if we should use more value-neutral words to describe the emotions of non-human animals. If we accept the premise that a non-human animal can feel joy, then they can certainly express it with their face and body, and any human or non-human raised by humans should be able to understand. And yet, I don't think I understand horses as well as I think I do. I'm not sure if I'm smart enough to know how smart a horse is, to borrow the phrasing of Frans de Waal. No matter how well I understand them, the barrier is still there, and my horsehood remains in some ways artificial. That doesn't make it any less significant than my bisonhood, which I like to think has some basis in reality. Honestly, the fact that my relationship with horses is filtered through many layers of anthropomorphism might, in a way, make it more interesting. Horses are as much an ethnological study as a zoological one. Maybe part of the reason is that horses are domesticated, so they primarily exist in relation to people. But my own horse identity only exists in relation to people, as opposed to my bisonhood, which is self-contained, or at least as self-contained as it can be when filtered through a human upbringing and a lack of direct contact with my conspecifics. When I was offered an internship at a riding school earlier this year, I jumped at the chance. I didn't realize how much I'd missed their company until I actually stood there, brush in hand, grooming the winter coat out of an elderly pony with Cushing's disease. I haven't always loved the care part of animal care. I think that I, as a kid, only used my pets for entertainment and company. Their relationship was hardly reciprocal. But as I've grown, I feel like I get more satisfaction out of taking care of them than I do using them for my own fun and games. It may be a chore to have to brush a horse daily because it can't shed its own winter coat, but not to me. It's never a chore if it's an animal. But unfortunately, I quickly learned that this sentiment was not widespread in the equestrian world. I worked at the riding school section of the barn, but it was first and foremost a boarding facility for sport horses. And while I don't for a second doubt that professional riders love their horses, I think there is very little reciprocity in the relationship. I saw people who loved their horses the way I loved my plastic horses, at once taking care not to scratch them and playing rough games with them. Even the most well-bred sport horse in the world was not born with the goal of becoming a show jumper. The horse was bred with that goal. Humans made sure it was put into the world with that goal. But the horse itself, the animal with its individuality and its own wants and needs, was not. The love that many owners have for their horses is completely unrelated to whether the horse loves them back. It's one-sided. It's parasocial. At the barn, I worked closely with a draft horse who had chronic progressive lymphedema, as most draft horses do. She was the sweetest thing in the world, and 4 days a week I would shave her feathering, wash her legs, remove her scabs, and rub her legs in wound salve. As part of treating her legs, I had to wash them with a hose. She was scared of the water. I asked around. The advice I got was to spray her until she stopped moving. This is a training method referred to as flooding, where the horse learns that it can't escape whatever is scaring it, so it should just give up. Every horse at the barn had been taught like this. I instead taught her the way you'd teach a reactive dog, by holding the hose in front of her, asking her to touch it, and praising her when she did, until after a few months, she would tolerate being hosed down. She loved this kind of attention, but she did not love her reason for being there, her job. She was brought onto the riding school as a physiotherapy horse, and she hated being ridden. It was not that she hated work, as I always had her full attention when I did groundwork with her. But when you put a saddle on her and kicked her flanks, she would try her best to bite your legs. So they shut her mouth with a flash nose band so she could still do her job. I told people about her personality, her needs and her issues, and it was strongly hinted at that I was causing trouble. Shortly thereafter, I lost the internship. I don't know if I lost the internship because I advocated for the well-being and individuality of a horse, but the timing was suspicious at best. The horses I saw were treated as well as any vehicle, maintained and taken to the mechanic or vet when something got in the way of their work, but never treated like autonomous life forms, only vehicles. And you don't consider a vehicle's opinion of you. You don't have a reciprocal relationship with a vehicle. I think, once again, being around flesh and blood horses, and this time both giving and receiving attention and friendship from them, made something click within me. I love horses, the real animal, not the plastic version. So much. I love them. But I love them the same way I love cats and dogs and guinea pigs and houseplants. I'm not sure I can live a fulfilled life without them, but there's also nothing unique about my relationship with horses compared to my relationship with other companion animals. Horses are complex individuals, and when I picture myself as a horse, there's none of that complexity. The horses I took care of were distinct from the horse I saw within myself, and in a much different way than the bison within me is distinct from other bovines. When I'm around cattle, I feel like I'm around brethren who just have a different way of perceiving and processing the world than I do. I feel at peace among horses, but I never feel like I'm hanging out with my conspecifics. I've been exploring pony play for a while at this point. Now, pony play is a kink, but for the sake of this talk, we'll only discuss the safe work side of it. That's the only side of it I've really engaged with anyways. During pony play, a person takes on the role of a horse, and usually another person takes on the role of a handler. The greatest hurdle I run into here is finding a person who will act as handler, and I think I know why. Dogs are common. Everyone knows how to handle a dog, so puppy play is common. Not so with pony play. I think it used to be more common when horses were an everyday part of society and people had a social script for how to treat horses. Even if said script was more parasocial than truly social. From medieval times, we have the story of Phyllis and Aristotle, where a woman convinces a man to wear a bridle and carry her around on his back as if he were a horse. By the 1600s, we hear of witches putting enchanted bridles on men and riding them to their witches' gatherings. From the 1800s, we have dozens of photos of adults riding each other like ponies. Do you notice what they all have in common? The horse is a vehicle. But when I'm playing this game, I don't mind being a vehicle. It makes me feel powerful and elegant. I feel wanted, like I have a purpose. I feel calm. Never has pretense come so easy. Maybe because, on some level, there has always been a little horse somewhere deep in me. Or at least there has been as long as I've had a concept of self. And yet, I don't consider horse a stereotype or heart type. I think of it as a link type. When I first mentioned that I develop an involuntary link as a horse, a certain bonobo cheekily told me that we already have a word for involuntary links. But I don't think it's that cut and dry. I think we've been too busy dividing our shared experiences of non-humanity into categories based on form rather than function. We've been too busy considering how it looks from the outside instead of what it does to the animal person in question. Coping link was coined during a tumultuous time in our community. Though, let's be real, when is it not a tumultuous time? It was coined in response to role players misappropriating the terminology we use to describe deep and integral non-humanity. But back then, we didn't define our non-humanity by integrality. Instead, the word we used was involuntarity. But I think even the coiner of the term, and I know you're listening, Paige, so I'm sorry if I'm putting words in your mouth, would agree that whether your non-humanity is involuntary is much less important than whether it's integral to how you view yourself. So while I never chose to become a horse, and never reinforced it much, I still wouldn't consider it a stereotype because it's not integral to who I am. I spent a decade removed from horses, and I was still recognizably myself. Take away horses, and little about me would change, except that I would no longer have horses in my life. The same can't be said for my bisonhood. If you took away my inner bison, I don't know who I'd be. Bison is my anchor. It's the lens through which I view the world. It's my skin and marrow and lungs. Horse is like a costume I love wearing so much that I forget to take it off. So yes, I do consider it an involuntary coping link. None of our terminology is set in stone. It's all just feeble attempts at describing our various relationships with non-humanity. And we've been non-human before we had terms to describe non-humanity. I've been a horse as long as I can remember, but I wasn't born with a horse's soul, whether literally or figuratively. I latched onto horses as a toddler, but never the flesh and blood version. I latched onto the plastic horse in my toy box. My bond with horses was parasocial from the start, and when it finally became truly social, I found I could not relate to real horses. I could now regret that my parasocial relationship damaged my ability to have a genuine relationship with horses, the same way I regret never knowing my pet rabbit as the wild animal she is. I could despair the way being socialized away from certain animals has robbed me of ever being able to truly understand them. But why would I do that? Theriform horses are complicated. They have welfare needs that are often ignored. They'll never see you as one of them, and to let them see you as one of them would be dangerous. Theriform horses hurt and kill therianthropic horses. Or they can. They don't do it in general. And knowing that there are animals blessed with the fur and hooves you've always wanted can hurt you, the therianthropic ungulate. I can never have a purely joyous relationship with other bison. It hurts to know that I'll never look like them, but not so with horses. My relationship with the plastic horse is joyous in all its artificial glory. So yes, I'm a horse, but not the horse you see running on the steppe or playing in the pasture. My coping link is not the horse you know. I am the Uffington white horse. I am the horse sketched in the margins of a notebook. I am the carousel horse. I am the Mustang that runs in people's dreams instead of on the prairie. Last month I went to a kink club, and a rubber pony was there. She let me try on her chemical-smelling facsimile of a horse head, and I've never felt as much species euphoria as I did then and there. I was ready to cry when I finally looked in the mirror and I saw myself. And now, time for the discussion. I see there's a bunch of stuff in panel questions, but I also see that there is a horse in the audience who wants to talk. And I value the perspective of other horses very highly. So I am inviting her onto the stage.
Want to?
Hey!
Hello. So, first of all, thank you so much for the panel. This was absolutely amazing. I'm sure that everybody in the audience agrees.
Thank you.
Your language is always on point. And what's important, what I wanted to say here is thank you for putting this idea in my head that actually didn't happen today. It happened when I beta read your essay a couple of weeks ago of this horse stuff existing in your head and to a point in my head too, in relation to people or non-humans with personhood, which is something that is new to me because I'm new to the topic completely. I got horsed a year ago, 3 weeks after I started estrogen. And
Horse drug.
yeah, and basically this is a very new idea and it's fascinating because I think for me it's a combination of both the self-contained horse and the person-relative horse, and it's been very interesting to explore this perspective. This is very new information, so that's great, and the way you described it is absolutely amazing. So that's the statement. Now for the questions, I wrote down 3 questions. First, did you ever feel horseful while around horses, like, flesh and blood horses? Because you did say you don't feel a one-to-one connection to them, like to the bison. But was there a moment where you were around horses and you felt horseful and there was some kind of an idea of a horse to an actual horse connection after you figured out the horse part, which is pretty recent, I believe?
I think it's more like being around horses made me think of horses. And that kind of synthesized a bunch of horse related thoughts I'd been having for about a year at that point. I got interested in pony play about 2 years ago, and I didn't get the internship at the horse farm until earlier this year. Um, so actually, I'd been working on this panel before I even started working with theriform horses. Um, but being around horses just kind of synthesized all the thoughts I'd been having, and it made I felt the opposite of horseful around them in a way. That's kind of how I ended up writing this panel the way I did. They made me realize that I'm not actually that kind of horse. The working title for this panel was Playful Horse instead of Plastic Animals. Because being a horse felt much more playful to me than being a bison does. But I didn't understand why until I was around theriform horses and realized that I'm just not one of them.
I see, I see. That is actually quite close to my experience because I do feel like a horse in general, but when I'm next to horses, suddenly I'm less horse, which is interesting. So next one. Would you say you want your facsimile horse facet to feel closer to flesh and blood horses, or instead would you put effort into making it more outlandish, unicorny, or do you just feel like being a whatever happens horse?
Well, I definitely don't want to make it more like theriform horses because they are very complex, and I like that this facet of me is relatively simple. Um, whether I could make it more artificial and outlandish, I mean, it could be kind of fun, but I think I would prefer to just let it be and see what happens and try out a couple different things and yeah, figure out what I enjoy. And to the person in the chat asking if the transcript will be posted, it will be posted on my website. And also, this entire panel will probably go up on YouTube within like 4-ish hours. The staff this year has been great at posting panels very quick.
That it? I have another one.
Yeah. Yes.
So, the final question is about pony play. So, do you ever exist or wish to exist outside of the elegant, powerful vehicle aspect that you described? Does a more two-way model of handler and their horse sound more, less, or equally appealing?
After the 18 plus panel yesterday, I can't help but wondering if there's like why you specifically are asking me that. Maybe that's for us to figure out when you get here next month.
All right. All right. All right. Well, thank you so much for the Absolutely Horses panel. This was an absolute joy to listen to and also talk a little bit. Now let's let
Yeah.
other people talk and ask stuff.
Yeah,
Hey,
thank
this
you.
is So Horses.
I'll go check the panel questions. Now to figure out where they start. Okay, I think I got it. A couple of us have been debating if we're horses, and this has been very eye-opening. Does anyone have advice about figuring out if you have an equine identity? Also, do you have a link to the text version? I'm sorry I didn't post a link. I have done so the previous years that I've read essays aloud, but I will post it on my website soon and then link it here. As for figuring out if you have an equine identity, I'm sorry this is kind of an underwhelming answer, but try it out and see how it feels. Try using a horse as your avatar online and speaking about yourself as if you're a horse, using horse figures of speech about yourself and so on. Just try bringing horses into your life and seeing if you recognize yourself in it, or if it's more of an outwardly directed relationship. Or yeah, and journal. Please write down your experiences. You don't have to do it publicly, though we all appreciate public writings. But just please journal about your experiences. It really does help a lot. Wonderlight asks, I am not a horse or even a Therian myself, but like I am the anthropomorphized version of a princess. I'm not the princess who deals with the politics of the kingdom, nor the princess who actively defends the existence of the monarchy. I am the princess who gets pampered, who goes spinny in skirt. I am the princess like Sailor Moon. Unsure if I'm a Disney princess, but that works for the metaphor. So yeah, I think a lot of a lot of identities can exist in this kind of facsimile existence, and still be very important to you. We don't all have to be a an Alexander Archipelago black wolf from 1994 who lived off of seal carcasses and salmon and had 7 cups and all this kind of grounded stuff. I think we have to broaden the scope of what an identify as identity can really be. And there is nothing wrong with acknowledging that your identity is a facsimile of the real thing, or yeah, in some other ways, kind of artificial. Kofa Tarkus asks, I feel disconnected to the furry fandom because it feels like a fandom of abstraction of animals rather than people who are interested in animals. Have you also felt this? I definitely see what you mean, though I have not myself felt a disconnect from the fur fandom. Probably because I'm very at ease with artificiality, especially now that I put it into words. But I'm also not deeply invested in the furry fandom. I prefer being around essay writers and discussions about identity and such instead. Chaotic asks, can a link to your website be posted somewhere? Yeah, I'll do it in a moment. I really should have thought of this before. I'm sorry, guys. Let me just read this before answering. So Mink feels like the concept of integrality is confusing, and asks if I had any advice for understanding it more. And I don't really know other than journaling. A lot of people have a lot more omskiftelig, like ever changing identities. My identities are fairly solid, and kind of easy to synthesize once you think about them after a while. And if your self-perception is even slightly more flowy than mine, then it might be very difficult to narrow down if something is integral to you or not, whether it's integral to your self-perception or not. So I'm sorry, I don't really have any advice. Maybe write an essay about how you think integrality is confusing. I would like to see some pushback on the idea because it's an idea I hold very high, I think. It's an idea I keep coming back to, and it would actually be nice to see a bit of criticism of my own ideas. And then here, Kova's asking, do I ask questions here because I don't want to speak? Please, if you want to join the discussion but you don't want to talk, please write in the panel questions channel, then I will see it. Silvana says, art helps me a lot to express myself. What's your stance on art? Does it help you with your species dysphoria if you experience that? So I'm lucky that I don't have dysphoria around horse because again, it's quite a simplistic identity in a way. It's very light, playful, and easy for me. So all I get from it is euphoria. And art definitely helps. I have drawn myself as a horse once or twice. But I don't know if it's more important than it is for my other identities. I think all kinds of modes of self-expression can help your can help you express yourself. That's a banger of a sentence. Yeah, different modes of self-expression can all help you express yourself in different ways. Oxen the Fox says, how does your experience differ from the concept of a horse archetype? I'm curious how you differentiate the two concepts, if you do at all. I haven't actually thought about this, so thanks for giving me something to chew on. I suppose I am the human-made archetype of a horse. If I had to pick a horse that I feel especially related to, it would maybe be Playmobil horses. You know, the really simple ones, the ones they made back in the 70s. That's like the perfect representation of a horse made by humans, if you ask me. So let's bring some people up here. Sephora. Wait, how do I? Hold on. Trying to figure out how to. Okay, so apparently I gotta scroll all the way up in the chat and see when you raised your hand. So there we go.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Oh, actually, one second. Let me use my headphones because I'm hearing a echo of myself.
Yeah, no worries.
Okay, how about now?
Sounds great.
Awesome. I'm sorry for any coughing. Like I said in the chat, I'm sick. I don't really have a question, more of just a discussion, I guess. Because I was raised in the horse racing industry. My parents have been in it since before I was born. Specifically the American one in thoroughbred and quarter horse, because it's like different in different countries. So I've been around horses pretty much my whole life. And the essay is really awesome. I love it. It's given me a lot of thoughts. And I was just thinking about how, like, at least where I live and have lived, because I've moved to 5 states, like stuff like writing schools isn't very common, or at least not with the people that I've grown up with. So most of most of my interactions with people who love horses are like the stereotypical horse girl that, you know, watches movies and stuff but hasn't really interacted with horses in real life. And in like horse communities, there's always been a real disdain for horse girls, quote unquote, and this view that they don't really understand horses and they see them as, you know, completely majestic and knowing and not dangerous animals that can be very unpredictable. And it's just giving me a lot of thoughts of how, like, over the years, I have kind of gotten away from that attitude of that, like, disdain towards the stereotypical horse girl. Because of course it's not their fault that they don't have access to horses in real life. It's such an expensive hobby, lifestyle. Um, and I don't think we should fault anyone for loving animals in a different way, besides, you know, abusive owners or whatever. But they have a genuine passion for the animals, and just because it's in a different way than people who are working with the horses every day and having to get up at 4 a.m. Doesn't make it any less genuine. And a lot of the times those horse girls are the ones advocating for horses in ways that people within the industry have been taught not to do. Um, because within horse racing, there is definitely, like, the grooms, which my parents were, the ones who are being paid to actually get up every day and at 4 in the morning and go take care of the horses and muck the stalls and take them up to the races. They absolutely love the horses and get to know them very well throughout the meet, but there is always an awareness that these horses were bought often for a lot of money for a specific job, and they have work to do, and that work is probably, hopefully, going to make the trainer and owner a lot of money. So if the horse is not feeling well or doesn't seem to like racing or, you know, has any number of issues, it tends to be discarded or try to figure out how can we stop this in as efficient a way as possible. And there are definitely some grooms who aren't the nicest to the horses. Sometimes my mom has gotten a horse for the meet who clearly has been not treated very, very well in the past, and she's had to work with them for a couple months to make them a little bit more calm. So a lot of times within the industry, you're kind of taught to not advocate for the horses as individual beings because you're always surrounded by an attitude of these are for money. So the horse girls, quote unquote, who are more separated from it can a lot of times be better advocates even, or make things happen, like with making online petitions and whatnot. So I think they're a valuable part of the of the community, and there shouldn't be such a disdain.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a lot of it comes down to the idea that a horse has a purpose. It's still a working animal. That they occupy this kind of weird space between livestock and pet, but in general they are still livestock and they have to perform their function. Otherwise, what's the point of owning a horse for most people?
Yeah, they're
So
so
when a horse,
separate from a
yeah,
lot of animals day to day because they've had such a long history of being specifically very useful and necessary animals day to day. But now that's obviously within the last century or whatever. They've kind of gone into this limbo.
yeah, yeah. I remember
Anyway,
at I went to zookeeper school and we had a bit about legality of various animals, and there were people in my class who were actually surprised that horses are 100% classified as livestock. And there's no overlap between horses legally and dogs.
hmm,
Yeah, at least
that's
around here.
interesting. Yeah, yeah. I imagine it's probably pretty different.
Yeah,
At least most places I've lived have been in like southern or midwestern U.S. So there's usually like farms and ranches somewhat
oh yeah,
nearby. So it's definitely there's more of an awareness, I think, that horses are considered livestock,
yeah.
and aren't necessarily pets. I mean, they can be, just extremely expensive pets with the highest vet bills imaginable.
Yeah,
Anyway, this is a very interesting essay. It has given me some thoughts of my own about like how being raised human has impacted my view of my stereotype. Because I'm not a horse. I'm a cat. Um, so I might have to write something of my own in the future about that. Giving me things to
thank
think
you.
about while I lay in bed sick.
Yeah, I do also think in the essay, because I didn't want to like go on a whole side tangent, but I do think I was giving myself a lot of grace about the supposed natural relationship and view of bison that I have. Like, obviously, my view of bison is also filtered through my human upbringing and my human surroundings. Can't really help
Yeah,
it.
yeah. It's impossible to fully get away from the anthropomorphization when we've all been raised and socialized human, where we see animals in certain lights. Um, yeah, I might I might write something about that in the future. Okay, I will get off now, but thank you so much for the essay. It was awesome.
Yeah, thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Wonderlight asks, silly question, thoughts on Uma Musume? Um, I don't have a lot of thoughts. Mostly what it makes me think of is the bad parts of horse racing. I'm not a horse racing abolitionist, unless we're talking steeplechase, that should not exist. But there are a lot of issues with the sport, and there's a lot of reasons the horses in Uma Musume are dead, for the most part. Um, I also have very mixed feelings on individual horses like Haru, the patron saint of losers. Like, she clearly didn't enjoy racing. They should have stopped racing her after a couple races when she made it clear she didn't enjoy it. Um, yeah, so my thoughts on Uma Musume are mostly about actual horses. And someone in the chat mentioned the horse Potatoes. Fun fact, he is the ancestor of like most working race horses today. He was he mayor? No. But Potatoes had a lot of kids and a lot of grandkids. So good luck finding a horse that doesn't have potatoes in its ancestry. Silly question 2. Have you watched Horseland? I did watch it as a kid, and I got massive gender envy from both of the blonde main characters, the guy and the girl. That's about my relationship with Horseland. Also, I like that all the horses have like colorful hair. That's very cute. Um, so yeah, I think Orion is about to start, so we should probably. Oh wait, no, we do have 5 minutes. No, you can raise your hand again. Whoever it was, I didn't catch your name. Yes, please.
I'm just curious about. Hi, first of all, sorry I didn't mean to come
Hi.
in fucking off guns ablazing, but I'm curious with the like discrepancies between your bisonhood and your ponyhood, right? Is there are there like different ways that you like connect with either? Like, so sometimes like say a wolfkin will play wolf quest to feel a little more wolfy in his human skin, you know?
Yeah, I get it. I feel like I'm at a point right now where I don't really feel much of a need to connect with my bisonhood more than more than I do. And what I do is just I gather more bison for my herd. And I think that's as much a bison thing as it is like a human instinct, because I acknowledge that I have a human body with human instincts, and humans like to collect and gather stuff and create hordes. So, um, but no, I don't generally feel a need to connect with my bisonhood. Um, whereas I choose to connect with my horsehood because it makes me feel nice. Which also, again, not because I really need it. It's a very easy way to feel good.
Yeah, makes sense. One is more of like a instinct thing, and one is more of like a yippee yay thing.
Yeah, yippee yay, that's a good way to describe it.
Okay, awesome. Okay, that's all.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah.
And in the panel questions, not sure if it got mentioned during the panel already, but feelings about Spirit. I love Spirit. I love the movie. I love the horse. I love Rain. I would marry Rain if he was real and could talk. Spirit is a great movie. I cry so much. I think I watched it so much the DVD probably got a bit scratched when I was a kid. Could never get the it's supposed to have some kind of DVD ROM thing where you can put it into your computer. That part never worked on my DVD. And I think it's because I just broke part of it. And a question about Centaur World. It's fine. I do brand myself as the #1 Centaur fan on Tumblr, which don't quote me on that. Centaur World is fine. I like the Elktar. I think Wama Wing should have had a bigger role. She was an interesting character who completely got sidelined after one episode dedicated to her. Yeah, it was fine. And in the panel questions again, I think I might be involuntary link. What should I question? I think you should just start journaling. That's the biggest piece of advice I can get. Record your experiences and research related topics to gain a better overview of it, and reflect on what you've learned. The 3 R's. Those are the ones I work by. Record, research, and reflect. That's the best questioning advice I can give. And it goes for any kind of questioning.